everyone. It's an honor to be here today amongst our incredible lineup of intersectional speakers to celebrate Sisters in Suffrage Recognizing Diversity. My name is Kathy Tran, and I'll be one of the co-moderators for today's event. I'm the daughter of refugees and have dedicated my life to making my community a better place through civic engagement. I can't wait to hear more from our speakers to inspire our participants today. I really want to introduce my co-moderator, Jackie, over here, an inspiring young leader herself, who I'm happy to share the limelight with.
Hi everyone, I'm Jackie and I will be your other co-moderator for today. I'm thrilled to be here to celebrate this special moment and the opportunity to hear from all of our amazing speakers. But before we start, this event would not have been possible without our hosts and sponsors, so I want to say a thank you to National Organization for Women, Asian American Unity Coalition, and Civic Leadership USA. I also want to say a very special thank you to all of our volunteers who offered their talents and time to make this webinar possible. Now, before we start, note that this experience is interactive, so if you have any questions at all, please put them into the Q&A and make sure you specify who it is and what it is about. Now, for our first interactive experience, please participate in the poll.
Know your suffrage. Which of the following is true? Okay. I didn't realize I was going to get quizzed. I see 12%. Oh, nope. 17% voting. Everybody's voting right now. I'm really excited to see the results. Okay. Got 64%. $68. 71% voted. So let's see. It appears that suffragists were perceived as unladylike and even unnatural was like the most popular answer with 92%. But actually all of these facts are true. So if you voted for any of them, you got it right, but it's all of them. Awesome.
Well, that was pretty interesting. I didn't know that all of those were true. It's kind of outrageous to think that women suffragists were thought as, unladylike and unnatural. Well, maybe in order to learn more about the suffrage, let's watch the video about women's suffrage.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal. No, that's not the Declaration of Independence. It's actually from the Declaration of Sentiments, a document signed at the first ever Women's Rights Convention in 1848. Back then, women in the US weren't allowed to do a lot of things men were, like vote, and it would take them another 70 years to be granted that fundamental right. Why? Well, many thought encouraging women's involvement in politics would undermine society. The prospect of women voting was threatening to the white men who held power. In 1848, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott decided to organize factions across the country that were campaigning for suffrage, or the right to vote. The convention at Seneca Falls, New York addressed women's rights and inspired other conventions and meetings. Stanton considered it the beginning of the women's rights movement. After the Civil War, the 15th Amendment was introduced, which would give black men, but not women of any color, the right to vote. Suffragists were split. Stanton and Susan B. Anthony opposed the amendment, objecting to the exclusion of women. They formed the National Women's Suffrage Association, hoping to pass a constitutional amendment that included women. Others, like abolitionists Lucy Stone and Henry Blackwell, supported the 15th Amendment. They founded the American Women's Suffrage Association and lobbied for the women's right to vote on a state level instead of through a national amendment. The 15th Amendment was ratified in 1870. Black men could vote, but women still couldn't. In 1878, a women's suffrage amendment penned by Susan B. Anthony was finally proposed in Congress, but it was defeated on the Senate floor in 1887. In 1890, the separate suffrage movements merged, opting to tackle suffrage by state in the wake of the federal amendment's defeat. Within 6 years, Colorado, Utah, and Idaho granted women the right to vote. Wyoming had already done it in 1869. Around the same time, the National Association of Colored Women was formed, bringing together more than 100 black women's clubs. It included leaders Mary Church Terrell, Josephine Silent Yates, and Anna Julia Cooper. By the turn of the 20th century, the women's suffrage movement had gained renewed momentum. Parades, marches, and pickets drew great attention to the cause. Between 1910 and 1918, a number of states and territories expanded voting rights to women. In 1912, 15,000 suffrage supporters took to the streets of New York City. But as women's political power grew, so did the danger they faced. In 1913, on the eve of President Woodrow Wilson's inauguration, hundreds of women were injured in a massive suffrage parade in the nation's capital. In November of 1917, 33 suffragists were arrested outside the White House. The women were clubbed, beaten, and tortured by prison guards at the Occoquan workhouse. One of the movement's leaders, Alice Paul, founder of what became the National Woman's Party, was placed in solitary confinement in order to break her will and undermine her credibility. But press coverage of the women's treatment increased sympathy for their plight. And in 1918, Representative Jeanette Rankin, the first woman in Congress, opened congressional debate on a women's suffrage amendment. The resolution failed. In 1918, President Wilson also came out in favor of suffrage, declaring it was needed as a war measure. Wilson argued that women had been providing vital roles during World War I, and that their votes should be counted in order to make the world safe for democracy. Finally, in 1919, the Federal Women's Suffrage Amendment, the same one written by Susan B. Anthony back in 1878, was passed by the House and the Senate. And on August 26, 1920, the 19th Amendment was officially incorporated into the U.S. Constitution, prohibiting denying the vote to a U.S. citizen based on gender, although states could still deny voting rights based on other things. It would take another 4 years for Native American women and men to get the right to vote, and more than 30 years before major restrictions were lifted on Asian American voting rights.
Wow. Jackie,
Wow, yeah.
I actually had no idea that, the suffrage movement took so long and with so many people participating in order to make it happen.
Yeah,
How old
and
are you
it's
again? Are you eligible to vote?
no, sadly, I'm not old enough to vote yet, but I know that I will in the future. I'm only 15.
Then
But
that means that you probably will get your pre-registration card pretty soon.
yeah, and it's really exciting to be able to exercise this right that we now have because of the women who fought for our rights in the past. And not only in the past, there are still many women still fighting for equal rights today, such as National Organization for Women. Today, we actually have the honor to meet Toni Van Pelt, the president of National Organization of Women. Let's welcome her to our program.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us today to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the women's suffrage movement. The 19th Amendment was a critical step for the women of our country. The suffragists who worked to get us the right to vote paved the way for the long history of women's rights activists like those of us in the national organization today. We are celebrating, but we also are using this as an opportunity to recognize that while the 19th Amendment gave some women the right to vote, it didn't prevent the horrendous forms of voter suppression that still exist today. The journey to the ballot box was and is different for a diverse group of voters. So many women who are dedicated to this cause have been forgotten from suffrage history and the larger conversations of voting rights, especially those who are AAPI, Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, Black and Brown women, LGBTQIA+ community, or those who have a disability. So now's Sisters in Suffrage campaign is recognizing diversity and shining a spotlight on those unsung sheroes, with a special focus on those with intersecting identities who have had to work in systems who have oppressed them because of those identities. These are the women that continue to inspire our work every day.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you for your words. I'm really excited to be introducing our next speaker, Dr. S.K. Lowe, President of the Asian American Unity Coalition. I think she's on mute. I see her.
Hi. Thank you for your kind introduction, Jackie and Kathy. I'm very honored to represent our organization, Asian American Unity Coalition, or AAUC, to welcome everyone. We want to thank the National Organization of Women to give us this opportunity to co-sponsor this webinar on Sisters in Suffrage, Recognizing Diversity. This webinar is a celebration of the 100th year anniversary of women's suffrage, which is a very meaningful event. Now I'd like to take a couple moments to introduce our organization, Asian American Unity Coalition. AAUC, it is called, is a growing coalition of 21 AAPI organizations and 14 individual lifetime members since its founding in September 2019. AAUC's vision is to gain equal citizenship for all AAPI to achieve our collective American dream. Our mission is to forge unity on our common goals and to empower our diverse community to speak with one voice. We believe diversity is our asset, unity is our power, and equality is our goal. Now, after witnessing the delivery of a few webinars by AAUC, I fully appreciate the long hours that many volunteers have put in to promote and produce an informative and mesmerizing webinar like the one we have today. For this, I want to thank Christine Chin Ryan, who is the mastermind behind this all. The tech support team led by Anthony Lay and Wen Yan, and everyone who worked behind the scene are instrumental in delivering the smooth, streamlining experience that we have able to experience today. They do deserve a round of applause. Finally, I want to thank all of the speakers and panelists and moderators for sharing their wisdom with us. Now we can sit back, relax, enjoy, and be thankful for this learning opportunity today.
Thank you, Dr. S.K. Lowe, for your remarks. Next, we have our panel, Unity and Leadership, Live Experience as a Feminist. And guess what, Jackie? So we actually have a video for this segment too. Let's go ahead and watch Recognizing Ethnic Diversity.
Aloha, ¿cómo están? Hello. I'm Dr. Alma Wansisuk Trinidad, professor at Portland State University School of Social Work. My research and teaching focuses on community empowerment, decolonizing, and deconstructing power. My work aims to indigenize and reclaim healing for our people. It is my great pleasure and honor to introduce our historical sister suffragists. Hope this helps in grounding us in our collective work for justice, freedom, and love.
Ida B. Wells Barnett was a leader in the civil rights movement, founder of the NAACP, and was awarded the Pulitzer Prize for her reporting during the lynching era. Isabella Bonfrey, adopting the name Sojourner Truth, escaped from slavery with her infant daughter and became a preacher and national advocate. Harriet 14 Porfis, along with her sisters, helped lay the groundwork for the National Women's Rights Convention and Philadelphia Suffrage Association. Josephine St. Perry Ruffin founded a number of organizations for Black women and published Women's Era, a national newspaper. Mary Church Terrell earned several college degrees. Her work focused on uplifting Black people through education, work, and activism to end racial discrimination. Angelina Welt Grimke, a daughter of a diplomat and civil rights activist, exposed the painful, violent experiences and double standards that women face through her writings. The 1924 Indian Citizenship Act gave Native Americans the right to vote in the U.S. Suzette Laflèche, a famed orator, served as an expert witness and worked as an interpreter in court cases that natives brought against the federal government. Marie-Louise Bottonnet Baldwin, Matisse Turtle Mountain Chaboy, worked to defend the treaty rights of their nation and educated people about the political roles of women. Sophia Alice Callahan, Muskie Creek Nation, wrote the first novel by a Native American woman which explored important themes of social justice. Virginia Howard Pilotway, a member of the Abscomie-Pukuni tribe and lived in the Blackfeet Reservation. She encouraged her people to vote on legislation that affected them. Setkala Sa Yankton Takodaswe was an author, musician, composer, lecturer, translator, and suffrage activist who ran a voter registration drive among Native Americans. She co-founded the National Council of American Indians and lobbied for the Indian Citizenship Act. Adelina Odetta Warren was a leader in the National Women's Party. She served as New Mexico's first female government official and made an unsuccessful congressional bid. Milagros Bennett de Betwen was an educator and women's rights advocate. She joined the first suffragist organization in Puerto Rico after the U.S. acquired Puerto Rico from Spain. Maria de Lopez was an educator from Los Angeles and the president of the College Equal Suffrage League of Southern California. She learned to fly a plane and served in the ambulance corps in France. Aurora Lucero White was born in New Mexico and lobbied to secure the state voting franchise for American women. She earned a PhD and was a distinguished fiction writer. Jovita Idar bravely fought injustice as a Mexican-American journalist, activist, and suffragist in Texas. She founded and led the League of Mexican Women, served as a nurse in the Mexican Revolution, and opposed the U.S. entry into World War I. Maple Ping Hua Li was a Chinese advocate for women's suffrage and the head of the First Chinese Baptist Church in New York. Dr. S.K. Chan was an herbalist doctor in Portland, Oregon, and president of a Chinese American Women Equal Suffrage Society. Her efforts led the repeal of the Oregon Constitution, granting suffrage to Chinese. Wahimina Kekela'o Kalani Nui Whitman Dawson was a native Hawaiian suffragist who helped organize the National Women's Equal Suffrage Association. Sofia Di Vera advocated for Philippine independence. While living in D.C. along with other Filipinas, she joined local women's organizations and pioneered women's clubs in the Philippines. Talia Swelt, in her early 20s, was the first Chinese American woman worldwide to cast a vote when she casted a ballot in San Francisco. Komako Kimura was a Japanese suffragist, actress, dancer, theater manager, and magazine editor before World War II.
Wow. It's so powerful to see the pictures and hear the names of the women of color that fought for the suffrage movement. I especially really connected with hearing about like the API women, just because whenever you look on TV nowadays, like you see really strong, powerful women, but I think it's really something to see all these names and these people in succession.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Kathy. That video was honestly such an eye-opener. It's amazing to see our history so full of diversity, but that's something that's sadly often overlooked. I wish I could have learned about this more in school, honestly, since it's not often taught about. But luckily, we can learn more from the lived experiences of our diverse, incredible women leaders from all over the United States. I'm so honored to welcome our next speakers. Congresswoman Lauren Underwood, representing Illinois' 14th Congressional District. Congresswoman Suzanne Bonamici, representing the 1st Congressional District of Oregon. Hala Ayala, representing the 51st Delegate Seat of the House of Virginia. And Jeanette Moy, Chief Operating Officer at Public Health Solutions. Let's give them a warm welcome to our panel.
So just to kick off our panel, we're going to go ahead and have a leading question. So this is going to be answered by all the panelists. So I'm just going to start off and then pick a person to start, and then we're going to move along. So please reflect and share on your lived experience as a feminist, personal or professional. We're going to start with Congresswoman Underwood.
Well, thank you for having me today. I'm really delighted to be with you. You know, I have always had careers in female-led professions. I'm a registered nurse. I worked in public health. I always had these dynamic boss women as supervisors. And then I decided to run for Congress. And when I stepped forward to run, I was prepared for racism, to encounter racism. And instead, we found that the community was a little surprised to encounter a young Black woman, emphasis on the woman, in seeking elected office here in Northern Illinois. And so we talk a lot about living our values and practicing our values, and that is something that manifests itself throughout the campaign trail in 2018. And so with my election, I became the youngest Black woman to ever serve in the Congress, but also the first woman to represent my district, which is pretty significant here in a state like ours, where we've had fantastic, smart, intelligent, dynamic, and visionary women who've come before me. And so, now I join the Congress with the most women serving concurrently in history. It's the women's voices who are the loudest, boldest, most powerful coming off of Capitol Hill. And, we've seen the impact, right? Folks just aren't comfortable sometimes when it's young women of color, outside of Speaker Pelosi, obviously, who are driving so much of the national conversation and debate. But I think it represents a strong step forward for our country, and I'm certainly grateful to be part of it.
So I turned my video off, but I was just going like, yes, 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 everything.
Thank you.
It's so amazing to be able to hear from you, Congresswoman.
Thank you.
I want to say thank you for hearing and for you to share your story and your experience. And I want to go ahead and welcome our next speaker, Congresswoman Suzanne Bonamici.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you to Kathy and Jackie. What a wonderful job you're doing. It's wonderful to see your leadership today. And thank you to Christine Chin Ryan. And of course, to my wonderful colleague, Lauren Underwood, with whom I'm so delighted to serve. So I am the only woman in the Oregon delegation, and I've been in Congress for about 8 years. And I want to start by saying, as a white woman, I so benefit from listening to and working with diverse women from across the country. And I really appreciated the video of the suffragettes before us. And I think back to the way I was raised and why I'm a feminist. I grew up outside of Detroit, Michigan. My mom was an activist. She marched for civil rights and against the Vietnam War. I didn't think I'd be in Congress. I thought I wanted to be a ballerina when I was growing up. But I learned from the way I was raised and the way I grew up that you speak out and stand up when you see injustice. In fact, my mom, who was a church organist, moved our whole family to a different congregation because where we were, they wouldn't speak up for civil rights. So I got that strong message, and then was recruited to run first for the state legislature. Women often wait to be recruited or are recruited to run. Served in the state legislature and now in Congress. And like Congresswoman Underwood said, it didn't really go as expected. I have had people from the very beginning when I started running for office and knocking on doors in neighborhoods asking me, well, who's going to take care of my kids? Well, they would never ask a man that question. Or what did my husband think about me running for office? And I always felt like I was getting asked questions that men wouldn't be asked. And we need a lot more women in office to help balance that and to make sure that women's voices from all backgrounds are heard. So I'm so thrilled that there's so many more women. We still have a lot of work to do. Grateful for the work of generations before us and all the different amendments along the way, including celebrating the anniversary of the 19th Amendment. I am ready for the Equal Rights Amendment as well, so we can make it perfectly clear that women have equal rights. And again, I'm so honored to be with this amazing group of women and share our stories. And thank you for your leadership and all you're doing.
Thank you so much, Congressman Bonamici. And I actually live in Oregon. And wow, I didn't know we only had one woman, one female congresswoman. And it's truly amazing that you're able to do that and achieve such a great position. And I see how many of our panelists are bold and unafraid to be the first to break barriers. And I think that's very amazing. Thank you again. Next, I heard some exciting news. I would like to introduce Delegate Hayal Ayala, who is also running for Lieutenant Governor of Virginia. And welcome.
Hi, how are you? Thank you so much for having me, and thank you all for being here today, Congresswoman Bonamici, as well as Congresswoman Underwood. It is a pleasure to see you all again. You know, for me, I have been a lifelong Virginian, working as a now activist and also, you know, working on many other fronts for women's rights. I am one of two first Latinas in the House of Delegates, but my background is Afro-Latina, Lebanese, and Irish. It is a lot going on there. And I bring all those personas to the General Assembly. But being a woman of color in the oldest body of our country has been so very interesting, to say the least. You know, when you're fighting for equity and to gain a seat at the table, women quickly realize in the political sphere that you are sometimes on the menu. So I encourage all of us to pick up our clipboards and sneakers and run for office. But with that, my personal experience, you know, just being a woman of color, it's that, you know, although we're celebrating the 100th anniversary of suffrage, not all women gained the right to vote when the 19th Amendment was ratified. It wasn't until the 1960s or 1964, the Civil Rights Act, and also 1965, the Voting Rights Act, when we saw Congressman John Lewis put forth this act and fight for our right to vote. We had to face barriers like poll tax, you know, just ungodly things just to have access to the vote. Additionally, it wasn't until 1975 until Latinas and non-English speaking Americans, the amendment was actually, I mean, the act was actually, I guess, amended or updated and included minority languaged individuals. So United States and its history has, of course, treated women overall as second-class citizens, but you know, we have come a long way, and we're going to continue to fight. And having this representation in the House, our voices, the intersectionality of our voices, and bringing forth those policies and things that really mean most to our communities is something that is sort of bittersweet in the oldest legislative body. I mean, I walk in the house of Madison, Jefferson, Lincoln, Washington, who took the oath of office in the same chambers that I sit today and developed a constitution who didn't include women that look like you and I. So serving in the House has been wonderful, and now we're trying to break even more glass ceilings that if elected into the office of the Lieutenant Governor seat, I would be the first woman, first Afro-Latina, and also the first national security specialist to sit in that seat. So we are going to continue to push forward as we all have done collectively together and continue to fight for a fair and just, not only democracy, but society. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Delegate Ayala. I think the point that you made about how you're sharing your identity and like being able to share so that like when people who are turning on their TV or in your district see a person like you and like all of our panelists, they see like an Afro-Latina person is not just like one or the other, but bringing in your entire identity. Like it's really powerful and special. I'm so excited to hear what everybody else has to say for this panel. So much that I have to introduce the next person. So welcome, Jeanette Moy. Can you share with us your lived experience as a feminist?
Absolutely. And so first off, I just want to thank all of you for this amazing panel that is being pulled together, the National Organization for Women, Asian American Unity Coalition, Civic Leadership USA, and Christine Chin Ryan for bringing us together. I'm really honored to be a part of the discussion on intersectionality, feminism, and women's suffrage. But as a few of us have noted, while 100 years ago women's suffrage was won, not everyone had the right to vote. Federal law denied people of Asian ancestry, people like me, from becoming citizens until 1952. And this history of women's civic engagement, inclusion, and representation at all levels is incredibly complex, disruptive, and often messy. And so we really must be aware of who's in the room and who's not, and uplift those voices. Today, I work at a nonprofit that's focused on health outcomes and improving health outcomes for vulnerable New Yorkers. And my lived experiences help me to ask why there's a disproportionate economic impact on communities of color during this pandemic. Why are women working harder and more likely to be essential workers, even with greater demands as caretakers of children and older adults? And why are Asian Americans being scapegoated for COVID and targeted with hateful words like Kung Flu? Having an intersectional identity, a mother, a person of color, a wife of an immigrant, a child of Trinidadian parents, a feminist, all these aspects help me and force me to really listen more carefully and closely to question broader community impacts when we're discussing our policies, directing resources, and building and developing budget priorities at work. And sometimes it's just fun to challenge people and surprise them by sharing my diverse experiences, because even today, I'm sometimes mistaken for the intern or the admin or the best resource for finding a local dumpling spot because, you know, although I'll admit I know a few, rather than being the boss. And I've had the pleasure and the honor of serving in City Hall underneath then Mayor Bloomberg, of working in the Attorney General's office under 3 attorneys general, and being one of the higher ranking Asian Americans in the state of New York. Yet still, it's always a surprise sometimes when I show up in meetings. But as difficult as these few years have been, I am really hopeful. API Vote notes that Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders are one of the fastest growing communities in the US, with over 11 million eligible to vote, the highest number in share ever, and women are more likely to be registered and turn out to vote. And we know that when we vote, we impact elections year over year. You know, it's funny, 4 years ago, my daughter and I were talking about the national elections, and and her experience was that she had a Black president for all of her life. And I told her that she might have the first woman president elected this upcoming November. And she didn't believe me. She actually made me ask Siri to prove to her that there had never been a female president. And as surprising as that was, and as much as that milestone hasn't happened as yet, I am hopeful and confident that one day it will, that all of us working together will make that happen. And before long, it's going to be her turn to vote. So it's, again, super excited to be here and talk about this amazing and noteworthy moment. And thank you for pulling us together.
Amazing. So attendees, if you have any questions for our panelists, don't be shy. You can go ahead and type in the QA. I see that we've already gotten a couple, and I am going to go ahead and read a question from Marcia. How do the women leaders work with people who are constantly discounting women's input? This is the Wild West. Anybody on our panel can go ahead and answer first.
Well, this is
Go for it.
okay. This is Suzanne Bonamici. I'll take a stab at that. It can be challenging to work with people who either discount you because you're a woman or have very different points of view. And honestly, some people think that that's all that happens in Congress, but it's important to be collaborative. And I have found over the years that when women run for office, they go there to solve a problem. My passion is education. I ran for office because I wanted to work on education issues. Oftentimes, with some exceptions, of course, men run for office because of the position. So they don't tend to be as collaborative, but we always have to try to find that common ground. So it's building relationships and learning how to have conversations with people, even people we don't agree with, and find something that we can agree on. But just again, it makes such a difference to have diverse voices around the table, because if we don't have everyone's voice around the table, sometimes we're not even identifying the right problem that needs to get solved, much less finding solutions that work for those problems. So we need more women, we need more diversity, we need more young people running for all offices, because your voices matter.
Okay, so let's see. Here's another question. There's a lot, so keep them coming. This is exciting. I like it, hearing from all these amazing speakers and their questions. So here's a question from Patricia. What is the status on passing the Equal Rights Amendment? I thought we recently reached the number of states necessary. Is this true? If not, what must we do to get the ERA passed? Anybody can answer it. I'm not going to pick anybody.
I don't know if Congresswoman Underwood is still here, but we did reach the number, and with Virginia voting to ratify. However, there have been some challenges because of the time frame. Some of the states that ratified earlier, there's an allegation that there's a time limit and that we'd have to start over again. So that's still being discussed and challenged, but I'm ready for the day when we have the Equal Rights Amendment to finally clarify once and for all that women have equal rights and are equal partners. I was proud to vote for legislation in the House of Representatives to get rid of that time frame, but it is, as I mentioned, still up in the air, but we're fighting for it.
Thank you, Congresswoman Bonamici. I also saw earlier that Delegate Ayala would like to answer this question.
Perfect.
Do you have anything that you would like to add?
Yes, I was glad to be the patron with Delegate Carol Foy to carry the Equal Rights Amendment across the finish line in the House of Delegates. Prior to being elected, I was an activist and worked for the Equal Rights Amendment, but the intersectionality of it, for so long, Black and brown women have not been on the forefront of suffrage. And I wanted to right a wrong, a historical wrong, especially with my favorite suffragist, Ida B. Wells, who was kind of defiant and, was getting into good trouble, and so I am all about good trouble. We had to fight. We did a tour across Virginia to educate voters. A lot of voters, to an earlier point made, thought that the Equal Rights Amendment was kind of in spirit or ceremonial, if you would, or they would think that it was already done, right? They just said, hey, why don't we have equal rights under the 14th and 15th Amendment? And I was like, no, we're still making 62 cents on the dollar. We're still making, if you're a Latina, if you are an African-American woman, you're making 63 cents and so on and so forth. So the ERA is much more than a ceremonial amendment. It will impact so many policies that have been, you know, pushed onto women, especially women of color, who have been disproportionately impacted by current policies that have been in play. Our government, you know, has been pretty much represented by cis white men, and we need to change that by adding our voices again to the table, or else we're on the menu. So the ERA, I'm hopeful and so glad of the work that our congressional individuals are doing to make that happen. But until we have the Senate, you know, controlled by Democrats, and I don't mean to be partisan here, it doesn't look like that deadline is going to be removed until after this election. So I'm looking forward to President Joe Biden. I don't mean to be too political, but I am a delegate and a Democrat, and I want to see him elected so that we are moving forth, putting in policies that have been disproportionately impacting people of color, women of color, and also passing the Equal Rights Amendment.
Thank you, Delegate Ayala. And yeah, I agree with you. We really need to fight for equality. It's much more than that. It's all to do with politics. We have to vote. And there are many different priorities that we have to address today, which goes into our next question from Jill Frankie, asking, if you had to pick a few top priorities for women to be addressed today, what would they be?
Let's hear from someone we haven't heard yet. Let's go with Congresswoman Underwood.
Well, I think that we have a long agenda for women. Healthcare, both our physical health, our mental health care, our reproductive rights, which have been systematically rolled back across the country. We have a lot of work to do in this healthcare front. I think that there is a women's economic agenda that is top of mind right now in light of COVID-19. Everything from equal pay, paid family leave, paid sick leave, affordable childcare, all so critically important in this time. When we think about women who are more likely to be essential workers, women are more likely to be frontline workers, and as a result get exposed to the virus while on the job. Women are also more likely to be the caregivers, both at home and in the childcare sector. And there's a lot of ongoing need to reinforce that childcare sector and make it more affordable for all families. We are not going to be able to have the swift, full, and robust recovery if we are not attuned and offering specific policy solutions to uplift women across this country. And that includes wages. And I want to be very clear about that. People just think if you give a woman a job, that's sufficient. But, you know, one of the reasons that I was such a supporter of the $15 minimum wage is because our bill eliminated the tipped wage. And that is one of the best things that you can do to help women, and specifically women of color, in improving our economic standing in this country. And so there is a long list of priority items. I'm sure the other ladies have their ideas too, so I'll stop. But I just want to say that, you know, we have to vote this year like our issues are on the ballot, because they are. They are. And there's a sense of urgency, there's a sense of finality, and there's a sense of we bring agency to this conversation. If we vote, we will get the elected officials who care about our issues and who will deliver for us. If we stay at home, good luck, ladies, because it's going to be rough.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I have the next question from Patricia. I honestly don't mean to make light of this, but my question is for Ms. Moy. You said you like to challenge people. When Trump racistly calls it Kung Flu, should people ask him if his own cabinet member, Elaine Chao, Speaker Mitch McConnell's wife, is also culpable for COVID-19?
Well, let me start off with saying no one should be asked that question. It is not an acceptable question. I wouldn't expect it from my children, who are 4, 7, and 10. I wouldn't expect it from grown adults. It's unfortunate at this day and age we have to talk about it. But on a local level, people are being hurt because of questions like this. I have parents at my local school where they're scared to send their children in because they're worried about how they'll be treated. There are parents I know who are scared to take the bus to go to work because they're worried of, some of the terrible violence that's taking place because they're being scapegoated for a pandemic. There is real hurt that's happening because of what's happening with this pandemic and COVID-19. It's economic pain. It is huge issues related to housing stability, food stability, and all of this name calling and scapegoating is unnecessary. We've got real issues to talk about. And those are one of the reasons why I think having people, women like us at the table, talking about it, reminding individuals that we are grown adults with real problems, that we have to focus on, those kitchen table issues. And I think without having folks like us really grounding it in our communities, that's where you have this, juvenile kind of name calling. So I wouldn't ask it of her. And I don't think anyone should ask it of any individual, regardless of their ancestry.
Thank you for your courage. I'm sorry, I was just looking through the questions, but I think that wraps up our section for this right now. We're going to move on to the next segment. Jackie, do you want to introduce that?
Our next segment is talking about the registration questions. Let's look at that real quick.
So when we first had people register for this seminar, we were asked a couple of questions, such as, like, are you registered to vote? Like, is your family registered to vote? So we're really pleased that over 400 people registered for this panel. And of the are you registered, we only had 8 people say no and 2 said unsure. So we're really excited that we can talk more about why voting is so important in this panel. And hopefully more people will be able to register and vote when time comes. In it asked, is your family? 2 people said no and 16 people said unsure. And I think the next thing that we wanted to show was how people responded to the reason why we're voting. Jackie, do you want to go ahead and read some of the words that are bolded that people explained why they vote?
Yeah, so if you look at the picture, there's some bigger words and smaller words. The bigger words are the ones that a lot of people have said when answering the question. So some of these including their voice, duty, heard, woman and citizen, change, democracy was a really big one. So I think just by looking at this, we can kind of see how a lot of people agree that our voice needs to be heard and it's our duty to vote, and it's also a privilege to be able to vote, and it's also a right that we need to exercise. So I think this sort of shows how we are all kind of united in our reasons as to why we must vote.
Okay, let's see. So I think right now we just finished looking at the reasons why people are voting. I really first and foremost want to say thank you to all of our speakers and also the people that asked the questions. Right now we're going to move on to our next section, but we're still going to have our speakers and panelists participate. So I'm really excited for this next part as a young feminist. We're going to watch a video of why young feminists are sharing why they're voting and talk about why it's so important to vote.
Most importantly, I am a feminist because I understand that my work is never done.
My name is Alexa, and I identify myself as a feminist because I believe that every woman should have the right to govern over their own body without the need of a patriarchal system imposing their outdated beliefs.
Hi, I'm Katie. Feminism is important because the end goal is equality for all. Although we've progressed far past the days where women were not allowed to vote and were traditionally looked upon as caretakers and housekeepers, there's still lots of room for change.
For me, feminism is not only about equality, but equity for all. Especially, intersectional feminism plays a huge role in my life, since I identify myself as a bisexual Central Asian woman.
I'm a feminist because I believe in equal rights for all, no matter their gender, sexual identity, or other identity. To me, believing in feminism means fundamentally believing in equality, period.
I'm a feminist because I believe in equal rights for everyone. I recognize that many groups throughout history have been marginalized, especially women.
I am a feminist because I have the courage to do the unexpected.
I'm a feminist because I believe that all women, especially women of color, deserve to be heard, understood, acknowledged, and represented in every single space where decisions are being made for the community or on behalf of the community. This is why we must take it upon ourselves to vote.
My name is Malaika Shah, and I'm proud to call myself a feminist. When I look back on the history of women in my family, I see a life condemned to childbearing and housework. However, by banding together, we women have been able to enact so much change. But there's still more work to be done.
It is crucial that we vote in November because we have seen what happens when we don't show up to the ballot box.
And I'll be voting in November because I believe in having government representation that also believes in equality and takes substantive steps towards it.
The best way to solve this and to work towards a brighter future is by voting.
It's been 100 years since women gained the right to vote. Shouldn't there be gender equality by now? It's time to take this issue into our own hands and level the playing field ourselves. Why do I vote? I vote so that one day my family has the same right to do so.
Voting is what allows people to be the change that they wish to see. So take advantage of the opportunity and take the time to vote for what you believe in.
As election day is approaching, I encourage everyone to vote. Choosing a suitable leader who is going to advocate for your rights is important. Every vote counts.
And I vote because being apolitical is a privilege. It is important to vote, to initiate change, and to have our voices be heard, especially to uphold civil rights, whether that be immigrant rights, economic rights, and especially women's rights.
It is crucial that we vote in November because we have seen what happens when we don't show up to the ballot box.
I urge you all to register to vote, to stay informed, and to not be afraid of your voice, because one more vote really does matter.
Wow. Lots of the women that we all just saw in the video all appeared really, really young. And it's really powerful to see young women recognizing and explaining why we must vote and enact change, because that is something that we must do, especially in this time period. Well, after that video, I think that we should continue our panel discussion. So I would like to welcome all of our panelists back into the discussion.
I'm so excited for this part. Hearing from everybody. I'm already learning so much from this presentation. I can't wait to learn more. So I guess I'll start with the question. Let's see. What impact have the feminists who have done this work before you had? Oh wait, no, that's the wrong question. Let's see. No, that's the right question. Sorry, I'm getting all of them mixed up. What kind of mentoring do you think would benefit you and allow a smooth transition of leadership? I know that we don't have Congresswoman Underwood's time for much longer, so I'd really like to pass this question first, and then I'll ask more for everyone else.
Well, I often think about Shirley Chisholm. Shirley Chisholm was the first Black woman elected to the Congress. She also was the first Black woman to run for president for a major political party. And not only was she the first, she was the only while she was serving in Congress. And I know how difficult serving in Congress is when I have 100 plus other women around, and I just can't imagine feeling that isolated with her colleagues sidelining her, characterizing her as a radical, and all these other things, not being collaborative, and how she continued to be this visionary leader. And so, you know, when I think about mentorship, I think that, yes, there's the professional coaching, but there's also like the friendship and the acknowledgement and the I see you, I have your back side of the relationship, which is so powerful and so important. And that's why, you know, my relationship with colleagues like Suzanne is so important, right? We serve on the same committee, and she's able to coach, able to be a friend, and, you know, just understand this unique pressure cooker that we're in. And so, you know, I appreciate, as we elect more women, we can do the same for others. And I think that that's going to transform American politics in the years to come. But that means that ladies, girlfriends, we have to run, right? Because these women are not going to fall out the sky. You know, we're not going to just magically appear. We have to, you know, work for it a little bit. And there's, you know, women like NowPAC that'll help, but we have to find that motivation within ourselves. Thank you for having me. And it's so good to be on the panel with all of you.
There's just like so much to take in. I'm like, who should I pick to go next? Jackie, do you want to ask the next question?
Yeah, sure. Maybe we should have a few other people answer the same question. Does that sound good? Or all right, let's see, actually, who should I go with? Everyone here is all such great speakers and give such good insight onto everything. Actually, let's go with Miss Moy.
You know, it's funny. So when I was born and raised, my mother, she is really an inspiration for me. And I think a lot of people look up to their parents. And so for my mom, she came here for college, you know, and they started, my mother and my father, a hardware store. They worked every single day at that hardware store. Actually, I was there from the time that I was 5, which I'm fairly certain was slightly illegal. We used to joke that we were I have one of 4 kids, and we used to joke that she kept having children so that we'd have staff over the weekend. But really what it came down to was like a lot of love and attention. And she shaped my worldview about what it meant to be a strong woman, you know, to always be reliant on yourself and to pay attention to the family that's around you. And I suspect that for a lot of us, those are the beginnings of what you think about in terms of feminism. And around me, I've been very grateful to have people who have been in leadership roles that I can look up to and then gather strength from. And particularly, there was a question before we talked where it was about being alone in a room. You know, how do you work with individuals who are maybe skeptical of you or don't trust in you because maybe you're a woman or you're something different. And I think having individuals that you can partner with, having mentors that you look up to, people who can support you, who can remind you that you have strength and confidence and that you are at that table for a reason, that you're uplifting others when you stand there is really important. And I think it's how you fortify yourself in difficult situations, whether that's in a boardroom or in, I would imagine, in Congress, or certainly in the New York State Capitol. And those are things that I think are just incredibly important for young feminists. And I think it's certainly something that I take for myself and I try to look for every day.
Thank you. So I think we have to acknowledge that we're all very busy, but Congresswoman Lauren Underwood was able to set aside a little bit of time for us today. We just want to make sure that we're okay on time, and if not, if there's anything you would like to say before heading out.
Such an important, critical election year. We have a lot of work to do. You have to talk with your girlfriends. Do not assume she knows how to vote. She knows how easy it is to vote at home. Do not assume that she knows who all the candidates is. We literally have to look out for one another, just like we share information about, you know, books or shows or, you know, who has the best deal online right now. We have to share information about voting, and normalizing it among our peer group is so very important. We have the ability to change our country in the next 90 days. And I'm going to count on the ladies on this webinar to do just that. Thanks so much. Thank you all for your leadership, all of you. It is extraordinary, and I appreciate the invitation to join you today. Take good care of yourselves, everybody. Bye-bye.
So Jackie, I think you can play you can pick the next person now. I think you did
All
a
right.
good job.
Well, thank you, Congresswoman Underwood. Well, she's already gone now, but she came here and spent her time with us. Let's move on to the next speaker. Let's go with Dr. S.K. Lowe. What advice do you have for younger women? What measures are you taking to mentor the next generation of feminist leaders?
Oh no, Jackie. We're supposed to ask somebody else, not Dr. S.K.
Oh, okay.
It's okay.
Sorry about that.
Let's. How about we ask Congresswoman Bonamici, since she's your congresswoman? Oh no, you're muted. Let me unmute you. Okay.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Terrific. Thank you. Well, it's such an honor to be here, and thank you for everything. Wonderful colleagues like Lauren Underwood, I'm honored to serve with. Every vote matters. I want to say that first. Our woman governor here in Oregon, Governor Kate Brown, won her first election by 7 votes. So for people who think that their vote might not matter, who might be complacent, every single vote matters. And it's so critically important, this election coming up in less than 90 days. And I tell you, things have changed significantly since I first ran for office back in 2006. I didn't know where to go, who to call. There have been so many more organizations started and support offered to women, especially diverse women running for any office. And that makes a tremendous difference. There's no such thing as a naive question. Knowing you can go and ask those questions like, how do I run for office? What do I do first? How do I hire a campaign manager? So there's a lot of support out there. And I want to say what a difference it makes. And once again, to have so many women around the table when we're addressing issues and speaking out. I don't know if you saw Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's speech on the floor recently, when she was demeaned by one of our male colleagues. She took to the floor and spoke out. And Representative Ocasio-Cortez set the standard for, yes, you must speak out and let people know when they're not treating women with respect. She earned the office, as all members of Congress have. So I also want to note that we still have so much work to do. A lot of legislative bodies and local school boards and things have more women. We're only about 25% in Congress. And just this morning, a major newspaper in the United States published a column that said that, oh my gosh, it's been 36 years since Mondale Ferraro that we had a man and a woman on the Democratic Party ticket. Now, I know a lot of us were pretty traumatized by the 2016 election, but we must not forget that Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. So it's about that education and saying a woman can be president, a woman can serve in every office in the United States of America. So please read up about the candidates. I know that there were a few people in the poll who weren't registered to vote. I'm assuming that because they're not eligible yet, but will soon. So exercise your right here in Oregon. We've all voted by mail for more than 20 years. It works well. It's a secure system, and especially during a pandemic. Make sure you're taking the steps to get your ballot in on time. It will make a difference. And please, run for office. We're there to help. I spend a lot of time talking with especially women and candidates who are running for office, not just for Congress. And I have a PAC and I support particularly women of color. So don't hesitate to reach out if you're interested in running for office. We need your voice. And thank you again for including me on the panel today. It's such an honor.
Of course. I also want to ask the same question to Delegate Ayala. And, what kind of advice do you have for younger women, especially like younger women of color that might be interested? Like what measures are you taking to mentor the next generation of feminist leaders?
I think it's important what both Congresswomen have contributed to the conversation, as well as Jeanette Moy. It is so important that we make room for the voices that are going to be our future. And this means allowing them to be participating or participate in the conversation. Maybe it's fostering, mentorship, or maybe it's going out into the community, holding either town halls or just training courses on what it's like to be a part of a governing body or in leadership. And that's just some examples, not all of them. But for me, I didn't think about running for office. I didn't think I was going to live this long, just based off my personal childhood experience. But somehow, some way, women reached down to me and said, "Hey, why don't you come join this wonderful organization? You just have, just come and listen, come educate yourself, come, not that I wasn't educated, but there's some things I just didn't know. I didn't know about all the aspects of how government worked. I didn't know, why my vote mattered. I didn't know, so many things because I was just in survival mode for so much of my childhood and my young adulthood. And that is the point where I crossed from being just a listener to being someone who engaged and participated in my democracy, the process of advocacy, being a leader in my community, and then eventually running for office. Again, if you only understood, the journey it took for me to have a seat here, I would have never thought or envisioned myself being a delegate at all, or running for lieutenant governor. With that, I can't forget where I came from, right? I can't forget my own journey. And I have to be receptive and always keep my doors open and listening to those voices who are going to be here longer than I will, after I'm done, in my political journey, whatever that looks like. But I think it's also important to touch on voting. I never knew how powerful my vote was until the 2016 election. Although I had been advocating for it, I'd been talking about it, I was bought in and I understood it, but I never knew the impact until we saw the election being stolen in 2016. And then in the House of Delegates a year later, one vote determined the majority. They pulled the vote out of a bowl, which was an 1800s archaic process that was in our Constitution, and said, okay, you're the winner. And just by one vote, we lost control of the House. And so that can have grave impacts on your policies and our communities. And so being a woman of color, that was devastating to me because I was fighting for Medicaid expansion. I was fighting for all these policies that we were just now able to pass after 26 years of Republican governance. So when we're talking about women of color, absolutely, follow the advice of all the wisdom that you've heard today, but also make it incumbent upon yourself to get engaged and talk about voting and why it's so important and why running for office or being a part of government matters. Because if we're not bringing forth our voices, we're not bringing forth our experiences, therefore we're not creating those policies that could help our communities. So that would be my advice, Kathy and Jackie, and to all that is listening.
Thank you. I feel like, whenever we talk about voting, this year COVID has made things very different on how we go ahead and vote. Does anyone want to share, like, what are some of the things that we can do to encourage people to vote when we have these crises happen? Oh, okay. Let me unmute you.
I might say, I really feel as though, if anything, this health crisis has identified some of these underlying challenges and inequities in our society. And it's really just laid bare how much bad policy hurts people on a grassroots level, on a community level. If we don't make the right changes, people can't get food. People can't feed their children. You can see that without having great people at all levels of leadership, it's not safe to send your child to school. And some of the most basic things in health policy are something as simple as wearing a mask to try to protect someone else. Those are becoming politicized. And so when you think about the importance of your vote in elevating discussions, it's not just theoretical. It is life and death every day across this country, and you can certainly see it in our communities. In New York, just a couple of months ago, I remember working with the mayor's office trying to find ventilators. I mean, what in God's name? We're in this, this great country trying to find basic medical equipment to protect people's lives, and we can't make those decisions. So I feel like today, if anything, what we're seeing in terms of problems that are happening at a federal level, miscommunications that are taking place at the state and local, all of these things show you that policy and voting and who represents you is important. There was a really great question that talked about, and I know it's so loaded, which countries are led by leaders that are women, and how did their outcomes change? And I do think that there is a value in having individuals who are collaborative, listening to all levels about how to make change. It's important, and competency really matters. So I think, Kathy, to your question, really the most important thing right now is that, we put in great people who know what our communities need and can help improve and pull us out of what's a really difficult economic situation. And health policy and public policy today are some of those important things that we can focus on, not to be too biased about it. But so thank you for the question.
Thank you so much, Janet Moy. I think sometimes when you turn on national news, you're like, oh, should I even be watching this? This is not like, it's really scary to see what's happening. But I think hearing from you all about the work that you all are doing in order to make our, our country and like our local communities a much better place. Like, I feel hopeful. I feel very, very hopeful. And you're right. Voting is life or death. It's life or death for our communities. And I really appreciate like being able to be in this space with you all. But I also want to ask Jackie, as a fellow young feminist, like what impact have the feminists, done this work before had on you? What kind of mentoring has led you to be in this space with all these incredible women leaders? I'm very curious and nosy.
Okay, well, when I was younger, actually, I immigrated from China, so I actually didn't receive much, like, I guess you could say, education surrounding this topic. My parents are really traditional. They just move here. We just try to make a good living, bring me to school, do good in school, everything like that. And politics, especially inequality and feminism, wasn't something that was touched upon, especially in my family. But when I went to school, I met a lot of diverse people and my friends. And actually, one thing that really helped me was joining this club in my school called Junior State of America, or known as JSA, which is basically like a political club where we discuss politics and the problems with our country. And actually, I think this was really like a turning point for me, like joining this club and hearing different opinions, attending all the events really helped me realize like all the inequalities within our world, and especially our country, and also just against women, especially people of color. And I think that was what actually benefited me. I didn't really exactly have a mentor. I just engulfed myself with other peers who had the same beliefs or like similar goals as me, and we all just discussed and talked with each other, and that really helped me explore this area and just, I guess, like show the world, I guess, my beliefs. And yeah, I would say that is what allowed me to have a smooth transition of leadership. What about you, Kathy?
So how do I say this? I was really apolitical, I guess. Like for most of my life, I didn't really pay attention. Like when I was in school, I was like in high school, like I played in a music band, I did musical theater and all that stuff. And then one of my my friends, I studied political science because I really liked reading political theory. And one of my friends invited me to attend this like Young Democrats club meeting. And it was a trap. It was such a trap. Like, because once you like join clubs, they just keep asking you to like go ahead and like do this thing and do that. And by the time like years later, I became the president. And then I started working on campaigns and like, it's just such a trap, but I'm involved because now I can't leave. I know that if I leave, then it's like, you know, you know that the work is important, you know that the work has to be done. And so I eventually became like a staffer. I worked for a legislator, and then now I currently work for a labor union to help advocate for workers. But I was like blissfully unaware, living my life, having fun, and then now I'm like very aware, but I'm still having fun. But you know, that's just how I got involved. And I would really like to thank my mentors for doing it. They were like these really powerful, amazing women that was the president at the time that like just kept asking me to do this and do that. And now every time I need direction, I'm just like, what am I supposed to do now? Please help me.
Well, I guess we had pretty similar experiences. That's pretty interesting, actually.
Yeah. I was like trying to figure out a way to say it, but it was kind of a trap.
Oh, Kathy, you've said it so beautifully. And I'm laughing so hard because I was like, yeah, come here. You just come to a meeting. And next thing you know, you're president.
Yeah. So I would like
Kathy
to
and Jackie, thank you so much for your leadership in your communities, but today it's been a wonderful experience to be on this amazing panel and to hear from all of you. And you know, our work has just begun, so let's go out there and do this together.
Go fight, win.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys all for attending today's discussion. It was really, truly like amazing to meet all of you, all these powerful women. You know, it's inspiring for me because like I'm so young, I don't know anything, but you know.
No, you guys are
you
inspiring.
One day, my
very inspiring
on a panel with you, and they'll be interviewing you. And looking forward to that.
Yeah, thank you all. We'll give you guys some time to, you know, close. If there's anything you guys would like to say before going, here's the time to do it.
Well, I just want to again thank Jackie and Kathy and Christine Shin Ryan and everyone for arranging this. Thank you to the amazing panelists with whom I've been honored to spend some time. And please keep up the fight, and we'll hopefully we'll be celebrating together when we get the Equal Rights Amendment and a big change. So thank you again for the opportunity.
So there's still like a lot of questions left, but I just want to encourage all of us to be courageous and continue to ask these questions throughout our life. And if, you know, whenever we hear answers that aren't good enough, like we can go ahead and hold a higher standard and find better answers and better actions when there's like all these questions that are unanswered. So thank you all again. It was so much fun being able to moderate and hear from our amazing speakers. And Jackie, you're so fun too. Like throughout like this process, it's been really cool getting to know another person from another state. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all for attending today's event, all the panelists and all the attendees. Thank you all for making today's event possible. And again, let's give a special thanks to the powerful women speakers, National Organization of Women 2020 Vision Committee, and the AAUC and CLUSA Committee. We would also like to thank the volunteers, as always, who helped make today a reality.
We want to be able to tell you what the upcoming events are in case, you still aren't convinced that this is very important. We still have so many cool things to get fired up about. So there are some upcoming events and programs that you can check out. I believe this is being live streamed, so you feel free to share with your friends and family. This is all really important information, and we are so thrilled to be able to be a part of this event. Thank you all so much.